The airport was still half asleep when the jet's engines whispered awake, lights blinking like tired stars against the gray dawn. A thin fog clung to the runway, wrapping the aircraft in silence that felt heavier than usual. Inside the cockpit, the smell of coffee mixed with metal and nerves. Captain Michael Harris adjusted his cap, eyes scanning the control panel, then drifting without meaning to toward the man standing just behind him. Ethan Cole paused at the cockpit door, fingers tight around a worn flight bag. His uniform was neat, but his shoulders carried a weight that didn't belong to fabric. Somewhere far away, a child laughed, maybe from a phone speaker in the terminal, maybe only in his memory. Ethan took a breath and stepped forward. Michael turned, his jaw tightening almost instantly. "I'm sorry," Michael said, voice low but sharp. "This flight already has a full crew." Ethan blinked once. "I'm your co-pilot?" Michael's eyes flicked to the roster on his tablet, then back to Ethan's face. Something unreadable passed between them, doubt, irritation, maybe something older. "I don't fly with distractions," Michael said, "and I was told you're a single." "Dad, that's not ideal." The cockpit felt smaller. The hum of systems grew louder, like the plane itself was listening. Before the story goes any further, pause for a moment. "Where are you watching from right now?" It still amazes how one quiet moment in an airport can reach hearts across the world. "Drop your city below. Let's see how far this story travels." Ethan didn't argue. He simply nodded, a small, respectful motion that said he'd learned when to speak and when silence was safer. "My personal life won't affect the flight," he said calmly. "It never has." Michael scoffed. "Everyone says that." He turned back to the controls, already dismissing him. "I won't take off with someone whose head isn't fully in the sky." Ethan swallowed. Images flashed through him early mornings, packing lunches, tying shoelaces with one hand while checking weather reports with the other. Nights when his daughter, Lily, asked why her mom never called anymore. He had answers for turbulence, for crosswinds, for storms at 30,000 feet. But not for that. "I understand your concern," Ethan said quietly. "But I'm here because I earned this seat." Michael finally looked at him again, really looked. There was no anger in Ethan's eyes, just steadiness. And something else, responsibility sharpened into discipline. "Captain," came a voice from the intercom. "Passengers are boarding." Michael exhaled through his nose. "This isn't over," he muttered. "We'll talk to operations." As Michael stepped out to make the call, Ethan remained alone in the cockpit. He ran a hand over the edge of the dashboard, grounding himself. His phone buzzed in his pocket. "One message. Daddy, did you take off yet?" He typed back quickly. "Almost." "Be good for Mrs. Grant. I'll call tonight." He slipped the phone away just as Michael returned, his expression tighter now, frustration layered with something else, confusion. "They say you're cleared," Michael said. "But I don't like surprises." Ethan met his gaze. "Neither do I." The tension didn't break. It settled. Like a storm waiting for permission. As passengers filled the cabin. Laughter and footsteps echoing, Michael strapped in with sharp movements. Ethan took his seat beside him, every motion precise, professional. Outside, the fog began to thin, sunlight pressing gently against the clouds. Michael glanced at Ethan once more, then away. "Just do your job," he said. Ethan nodded. "I always do." The engines grew louder. Somewhere beyond the cockpit door, lives leaned back into their seats, unaware of the quiet conflict unfolding just feet away. Two men, one aircraft, and a line drawn not in the sky but in the heart. The plane began to roll, slow and steady, toward the runway. And neither of them yet knew that this flight would change far more than their destination. The aircraft lifted smoothly into the morning sky, the runway shrinking beneath them like a memory already fading. Sunlight spilled through the cockpit windows, painting soft gold across the controls. Ethan's hands moved with quiet confidence, every switch and dial handled as if he'd known them his entire life. He spoke only when necessary, his voice calm, measured, almost soothing. Michael noticed it, though he refused to admit it to himself or anyone else. At 10,000 feet, the seatbelt sign chimed off. The cabin relaxed. Coffee carts rattled. Somewhere behind them, a baby cried, then quieted. Ethan adjusted a frequency and glanced at the weather radar. Light turbulence ahead, he said. Nothing serious. Should pass in about 6 minutes. Michael gave a short nod. No comment. But he followed Ethan's suggestion without question. Minutes later, the plane shuddered once sharp, unexpected. A sudden pocket of rough air. The controls trembled slightly. Michael stiffened, instinct kicking in. Before he could react, Ethan had already compensated, easing the aircraft through the disturbance with a smooth correction that barely registered. Turbulence faded as quickly as it came. Nice catch, Michael muttered before he could stop himself. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just said, team effort, and went back to monitoring the instruments. That was the first crack. An hour into the flight, a flight attendant knocked softly and leaned in. Captain, we have an elderly passenger in 14C feeling dizzy. Blood. Pressure's dropping a bit. Michael frowned. Medical kit. Already on the way. Ethan was already unstrapping. I did emergency response training last quarter, he said. Mind if I take a look? Michael hesitated. For a second. His pride rose up, then fell. Go, he said. Ethan moved fast, but gentle down the aisle, kneeling beside the woman, speaking to her like she was someone's grandmother because she was. He checked her pulse, elevated her feet, talked her through slow breaths until her color returned. He even cracked a small joke about airline coffee earning a weak laugh. When he returned to the cockpit, Michael watched him differently. If you were there in that moment, the narrator's voice softens. What would you have done? Be honest. Would you have stepped forward or waited for someone else? Share your answer below. And if words don't come easily, just hit like to show that kindness still matters. The flight continued quietly after that. The earlier edge between them dulled into something less sharp. Still tense but calmer, like a storm that chose to stay distant. Michael broke the silence first. So, how old is your kid? Ethan glanced over, surprised. 7, Lily. Michael nodded. That's young. Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah, too young to understand why her mom left. Old enough to ask why. The cockpit filled with a hum that felt heavier now, not mechanical, but human. Michael cleared his throat. That's why I don't like flying with parents, he said. Too much to lose. Ethan didn't bristle. That's exactly why I'm careful, he replied. Every checklist, every call-out. I fly like someone's waiting for me to come home because someone is. Michael stared ahead, jaw tightening again. But this time it wasn't judgment behind it. It was something closer to reflection. Hours later, as they cruised above a blanket of clouds, operations radioed in. A minor routing change due to weather ahead. Michael acknowledged, then paused. Ethan, he said, can you run the alternate fuel calculations? Just to double check. Already did, Ethan replied, turning the tablet toward him. Where? Good. Even with a delay. Michael studied the numbers. They were flawless. Another crack. The plane glided on, steady and sure. Outside, the sky deepened to a richer blue, endless and calm. Inside the cockpit, 2 lives, once separated by assumption, slowly drifted closer to understanding. But beneath Ethan's calm exterior, something stirred. A memory he hadn't shared. A truth heavier than turbulence. As the destination drew nearer, Michael leaned back slightly, exhaling. He said, almost reluctantly, you don't fly like someone distracted. Ethan looked out the window, clouds sliding past like quiet witnesses. I can't afford to be, he said. Michael nodded again, slower this time. Neither of them noticed the subtle shift in the aircraft's tone. A soft alert, barely audible, blinking once then gone. Ethan did. He leaned forward slightly. Captain, he said. Did you see that flicker on the auxiliary panel? Michael turned, brows furrowing. No, what was it? Ethan's eyes stayed on the instruments, focused, serious. I'm not sure yet, he said, but I think we should take a closer look. The sky outside remained calm, but something unseen had just begun to move beneath the surface, and this flight was about to ask more of them than either expected. Ethan leaned closer to the panel, eyes narrowing as his fingers hovered just above the switches. The alert hadn't returned, but its absence bothered him more than a persistent warning would have. Silence in aviation could be deceptive. Hydraulic. Pressure dipped for half a second, he said quietly. It stabilized, but that kind of flicker usually means something's thinking about failing. Michael's posture stiffened. He scanned the instruments, then cross-checked with the overhead panel. Everything read normal. Too normal. Could have been turbulence interference, Michael said, though his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Ethan replied, but I've seen this pattern before. Michael glanced at him. Where? Ethan hesitated, just briefly. Training flights, and once on a private charter. That answer opened a door neither of them fully stepped through. Yet, Michael nodded, filing it away. Let's monitor it. No need to spook the cabin. They flew on, the aircraft steady, the sky wide and forgiving, but the mood in the cockpit had changed. The earlier tension had transformed into something quieter alertness. Sharpened by trust that was still forming, fragile as thin ice, minutes stretched, then another flicker, longer this time. There it was. Ethan didn't wait. Auxiliary hydraulic system, he said. Pressure drop again. If it degrades, we'll lose redundancy for the flaps, Michael's jaw set. At this altitude, we've got time. Run the checklist. They worked in sync now, no hesitation, no overlap. Michael read. Ethan responded. Their voices stayed calm, clipped, professional. To anyone listening, it would have sounded routine. Inside Ethan's chest, though, something tightened. As they stabilized the system, Michael glanced over. You stayed unusually calm just now. Ethan exhaled slowly. Panic doesn't help. Preparation does. Michael studied him for a second longer than necessary. You learned that somewhere specific? Ethan's eyes stayed forward. The clouds outside looked thicker now, layered like pages of an unfinished story. Life teaches you, he said. Especially when mistakes have faces. The aircraft leveled out. The warning didn't return. For now, the quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was reflective. Michael broke it gently. So, Lily, who watches her when you're flying? A retired teacher down the street, Ethan said. Mrs. Grant. She lost her husband years ago. Says Lily keeps the house from feeling too empty. Michael nodded. Sounds like you've built a system. I had to. Ethan paused, then added, when Lily's mom left, there wasn't a backup plan. Just me. Michael shifted in his seat. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, Ethan said simply. But kids don't wait for you to be ready. That line lingered. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? If yes, write yes and share their name below. Sometimes gratitude deserves to be spoken aloud, even years later. Michael cleared his throat. You know, he said, my father was a pilot too. Old school. Believed emotions had no place in the cockpit. Ethan glanced over. Did you believe him? For a long time, Michael admitted. Until my divorce. Turns out you can fly perfectly and still crash at home. Ethan gave a small, understanding nod. No advice, no pity. Just presence. Another hour passed. The destination weather came in cloudy, moderate winds. Manageable but demanding precision. As they reviewed approach procedures, a voice crackled through the radio. Captain Harris, be advised ownership documentation flagged. Aircraft registered under Cole Aviation Holdings. Michael frowned. Repeat. The controller repeated it. Michael slowly turned his head toward Ethan. Cole, as in, Ethan swallowed. It's under my name. The cockpit seemed to contract around them. You own this aircraft? Michael asked, disbelief sharp in his tone. Ethan nodded, eyes still forward. Inherited. My father. Michael leaned back, stunned. His earlier words echoed in his mind. I don't fly with distractions. Single dad. Not ideal. And you didn't think to mention that? Michael asked. Ethan finally looked at him. Would it have changed how you treated me? The question landed hard. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again. Outside, the clouds thickened, the plane beginning its descent through layers of gray. The weight in the cockpit wasn't about ownership, it was about judgment. About assumptions made too quickly and words spoken too easily. Michael started, then stopped. His voice softened. I didn't know. Ethan nodded. Most people don't, and most days it doesn't matter. They turned their focus back to the approach. The runway was still miles away, hidden behind clouds. The aircraft responded smoothly to every input, as if trusting them both. But Michael's hands trembled slightly on the controls, not from the wind, but from the realization settling in his chest. The man he had nearly grounded was the man who owned the wings beneath them. And somewhere in the back of Ethan's mind, a deeper truth waited, one he hadn't yet revealed. The descent grew bumpier as they pushed through thicker clouds, the aircraft rocking gently but persistently. Michael adjusted the controls, his earlier confidence now threaded with humility. The revelation sat between them, not loud, not explosive, but heavy, like unspoken weather. You could have shut me down, Michael said at last. Filed a complaint, used your position. Ethan shook his head. That's not why I fly, he replied. And not why my father bought planes in the first place. Michael glanced at him. Your father? He believed aviation was about trust, Ethan said. You hand your life to people you've never met. He said the least we could do is deserve it. The runway lights blinked faintly through the cloud cover, then vanished again. Michael swallowed. I judged you, he admitted. The moment I heard single dad, I assumed your priorities were split. Ethan's voice stayed even. They are, he said. But that doesn't make them weaker. It makes them sharper. The plane steadied as they leveled briefly, air traffic controls spacing them for landing. In the pause, memories pressed in. On Ethan, his father teaching him to read wind like a language, his mother's quiet smile from the hangar fence, and later, the hospital room, machines beeping, a promise made beside a bed that smelled like antiseptic and goodbye. My father died 2 years ago, Ethan said. Heart attack. He left me the company and this aircraft. I was still figuring out diapers and night shifts. Michael absorbed that. That's a lot to carry. Ethan nodded. It's why I don't waste energy proving myself. I just do the work. Another mild jolt shook the cabin. The auxiliary system flickered again, this time steady enough to notice. Ethan's hand moved instantly. Pressure's drifting, he said. Still within limits, but we'll need a clean approach. Michael didn't question him. You call it. They coordinated the landing plan with quiet precision, each instruction answered without delay. The runway finally emerged, wet and gleaming, framed by gray. The wind nudged them sideways. Michael corrected, Ethan monitoring speed and flap settings. With hawk-like focus Dot as they crossed the threshold, the aircraft settled tires kissing the runway with a firm, confident thud. Reverse thrust roared, then eased. The plane slowed, steady and safe. The cabin erupted in polite applause. Michael exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to Ethan, eyes bright with something like respect. "Hell of a landing," he said. Ethan allowed a small smile. "Team effort." As they taxied to the gate, Michael sat back, hands resting on his knees. "You know," he said, quieter now, "I've spent years thinking strength meant leaving parts of yourself at the door. Maybe I was wrong." Ethan didn't answer, right? Away. He looked out of the tarmac, ground crew moving with practice rhythm. "We all bring something with us," he said. "The trick is making sure it helps, not hurts." They parked. Engines powered down. The sudden silence felt profound. Passengers disembarked, unaware of the invisible shift that had happened up front. A flight attendant poked her head in. "Miss." "Work, gentlemen," she said warmly. When the door closed again, Michael stood, then paused. "Ethan, I owe you an apology." Ethan met his eyes. "For what?" "For assuming your life made you less capable," Michael said. "And for almost grounding someone who was more prepared than I was." Ethan considered him, then nodded once. Apology accepted. There was relief in Michael's face, real, unguarded. "Now it's your turn. Think about a small, good thing you did recently, something quiet, maybe unnoticed. Share it below so others remember that humanity still lives." Your story might light someone's path tonight. As they gathered their things, Michael hesitated again. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ethan adjusted his bag strap. "You already did," he said gently, "but go ahead." Michael smiled. Faintly. "Why keep flying commercial if you own the aircraft?" "The company, you could step back." Ethan's phone buzzed. A photo filled the screen. Lily, missing 2 front teeth, holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, pilot." "Daddy," glitter everywhere. Ethan's voice softened. "Because I want my daughter to grow up seeing her dad show up. Not hide behind ownership. Not skip the hard parts." Michael nodded, throat tight. "She's lucky." Ethan looked at the photo again. "So am I." They stepped out into the terminal, crowds flowing around them like a living river. For a moment, Michael stopped and turned back. "Ethan," he said, "if I ever fly with you again, I'd be honored." Ethan extended a hand. Michael shook it firmly. As they parted ways, Ethan felt the familiar pull of responsibility, but lighter now. Not because it was gone, because someone finally saw it for what it was. Outside the terminal windows, the aircraft rested quietly, its metal skin cooling under the gray sky. It had carried them safely, but more than that, it had carried a lesson neither man would forget, and somewhere ahead, beyond schedules and storms, Ethan knew another conversation waited, one that would test not skill, but forgiveness. Ethan didn't head straight home after the flight. He sat in his car in the employee parking lot, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel as if he were still airborne. The terminal's glass reflected a tired man back at him, creased. Uniform, shadowed eyes, and a calm that had been earned the hard way. His phone buzzed again. "Can you come to the school tonight?" Mrs. Grant had written. Lily's recital is earlier than planned. Ethan checked the time. He had barely an hour. "I'll make it," he whispered, already turning the key. The school auditorium smelled of polished wood and nervous children. Paper. Stars hung from the ceiling, crooked and hopeful. Parents filled the folding chairs, phones raised, hearts leaning forward. Ethan slipped into the back row just as the lights dimmed. Lily stood on stage with a dozen other kids, her small hands gripping a paper folder. She scanned the crowd, eyes wide, then found him. Her face lit up, a smile so bright it hurt. Ethan pressed a hand to his chest. Thought the song was off-key. the choreography uneven. None of it mattered. Lily sang like she meant every word, like the world was safe as long as someone was listening afterward. She ran to him, nearly knocking him over. "You came," she shouted. "Always," he said, lifting her. "I promised." On the drive home, Lily chattered about glitter and stage fright, about how she'd been scared he wouldn't make it. Ethan listened, answering, reassuring. At a stoplight, she grew quiet. "Daddy," she said softly, "do people think you're bad because Mommy left?" The question hit like sudden turbulence. "No," Ethan said carefully. "Some people don't understand things they haven't lived. But that doesn't make them right." Lily nodded, absorbing it in her own way. "I know you're good," she said. "You tuck me in every night." That night, after Lily fell asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. He stared at an unopened envelope he'd been avoiding for weeks. The return address belonged to someone he hadn't spoken to since the funeral, Michael. Harris. Inside was a handwritten note. "Ethan, I've been thinking a lot since our flight. About my assumptions, about my own failures. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd like the chance to earn it. If you're willing, I'd like to talk off the clock." Ethan folded the letter slowly. His chest tightened, not with anger, but with memory. He thought of all the moments he'd been dismissed, judged, quietly sidelined. He thought of his father's voice. "Trust is built when we choose to stay present." The next day, he agreed to meet. They sat in a small cafe near the airport. No uniforms, just two men and steaming cups of coffee. Michael looked older, somehow less armored. "I lost my son," Michael said suddenly. "Years ago. Car accident. I never talk about it." Ethan's breath caught. "That's why I react." "The way I do," Michael continued, "when I see parents flying, I think of everything that can go wrong. I thought pushing people away would keep the skies safer." Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. "When I saw how you flew," Michael said, voice breaking slightly, "I realized I wasn't protecting anyone. I was just afraid." The silence between them was heavy but honest. If that moment hit you hard, leave it. Sometimes one small symbol says what our hearts can't. Ethan finally spoke. "Pain doesn't make us dangerous," he said. "It makes us human. What we do with it, that's the difference." Michael nodded, eyes wet. "I'm sorry," he said again. "Not as a captain, as a man." Ethan considered him, the cafe's morning light soft on their faces. "I don't need you to be perfect," he said. "I just need you to be aware." Michael let out a shaky breath. "I can do that." They talked for another hour about flying, about loss, about the strange ways grief rewires love. When they stood to leave, something had shifted again, not dramatically, but meaningfully. Outside, planes lifted into the sky one by one. Silver and strong. As Ethan walked back to his car, his phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "This is Ava Cole. I heard about the flight. About Lily. We need to talk." Ethan's heart skipped. "Ava, Lily's mother. The past." It seemed wasn't finished with him yet, and as he stared at the message, knowing what it could reopen, one question echoed quietly inside him, not about flying, but about forgiveness. Ethan didn't reply to Ava's message right away. He sat in his car, the cafe fading behind him, the engine idling like a held breath. 3 years of silence had trained his heart to stay guarded. And yet, with one name on a screen, old wounds stirred sharp, familiar. That evening, Lily colored at the kitchen table while Ethan cooked pasta. The radio murmured softly, "Normal life. Fragile life." "Daddy," Lily said without looking up. "Do you still love Mommy?" Ethan froze, wooden spoon hovering midair. "Yes," he said honestly, in a different way. "I love the part of her that helped make you." Lily nodded, satisfied. Okay. After Lily went to bed, Ethan finally typed back, "We can talk." Tomorrow, for Lily, they met at a park near Lily's school. The swings creaked gently in the late afternoon light. Ava stood near the bench, thinner than he remembered, eyes tired. "But searching, Ethan," she said. "Ava." For a moment, they just stood there, years of absence stretching between them. "I didn't leave because of Lily," Ava said quickly, words tumbling out. "Or because of you. I left because I couldn't breathe anymore. I was breaking." Ethan listened. "He always had. I went to therapy," she continued. "I got help. I know I don't deserve anything, but I want to be part of her life, even a small part." Ethan's chest tightened. Anger flickered, but so did empathy. He thought of the nights Lily cried for her mother, of the mornings he carried both grief and resolve into the sky. "Lily needs stability," he said, "not promises that disappear." "I know," Ava whispered. "I'm not asking for trust. Just a chance to earn it." They sat on the bench, watching children run and fall and get back up again. "Life, messy and persistent. Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could. Or never if it would break you too deeply." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Forgiveness wasn't a single moment, it was a series of choices. "Painful ones. We'll start slow," he said finally. "Supervised visits, and Lily decides the pace." Ava nodded, tears spilling freely. "Thank you." That night, Ethan told Lily the truth gently, carefully. "Mommy wants to see you," he said, "but only if you want to." Lily thought for a long moment. "Can you be there too?" "Always," Ethan said. Days turned into weeks. Ava showed up. On time. Every time. She listened more than she spoke. Lily warmed gradually, cautiously, like a flower testing the sun. Meanwhile, another flight approached. Ethan and Michael were paired again, this time by choice. The cockpit felt different now, lighter. The trust between them no longer tentative. As they cruised above the clouds, Michael glanced over. "I heard you're letting her back in," he said quietly. Ethan nodded. "For Lily," Michael smiled. "That's real courage." The flight was smooth. No flickers, no warnings. Just sky and steady hands. As they began their descent, sunlight broke through the clouds, flooding the cockpit in gold. Ethan thought of all the roles he carried: pilot, father, son, bridge between what was broken and what might heal. When they landed, Michael clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "You're a good man, Ethan." Ethan smiled. "I'm just trying to be present." Later that night, Ethan tucked Lily into bed. Ava stood quietly at the doorway, respectful, hopeful. "Daddy," Lily said sleepily, "I like when everyone's nice." Ethan kissed her forehead. "Me too." As he turned off the light, a sense of peace settled, not perfect, not complete, but real. And if you believe love still wins, comment amen. Let's fill this moment with hope. Someone scrolling right now might need to see it. Ethan stood in the hallway, listening to Lily's breathing, feeling the weight of his journey soften into something warm. The skies would never be free of storms, but he had learned you don't need clear skies to fly true. The weeks that followed didn't feel dramatic. There were no soaring speeches or cinematic crescendos. Just mornings, evenings, small adjustments, life settling into a new rhythm that felt unfamiliar, but right. Ethan noticed it most in the quiet moments. Saturday breakfast, where Lily insisted on pouring the milk herself, spilling half of it and laughing. Ava sitting across the table, hands folded, waiting for permission before speaking, before slowly becoming part of the conversation. Trust didn't rush back. It walked, carefully, one step at a time. At work, Ethan's reputation shifted too. Not because people learned he owned the aircraft, but because they saw how he flew. Calm under pressure, exact without ego. Present, Younger pilots began asking him questions after flights. Senior crew listened when he spoke. Michael watched it all with a kind of pride he hadn't expected to feel. One evening, after a long-haul landing, Michael stayed behind as the crew dispersed. The hangar echoed with distant footsteps and cooling. Metal, Michael said, leaning against a railing. I used to think respect came from authority. From rank. Ethan set his bag down. What do you think now? I think it comes from consistency, Michael replied. From showing up the same way, even when no one's watching. Ethan nodded. That's true in the air and at home. Michael hesitated, then added, I spoke to my ex-wife last week. For the first time in years, Ethan looked at him, surprised. How did that go? Hard, Michael admitted, but honest. I apologized without defending myself. Didn't realize how much I'd been flying away from my own life. They stood in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. At Lily's school. Parents began to recognize Ethan not as the pilot, but as the dad who always showed up. Field trips, bake sales, parent-teacher meetings squeezed between flights. Ava attended too now, always checking Ethan's face before sitting beside him. One afternoon, Lily came running out of school holding a drawing. 3 stick figures, 1 airplane above them. Look, she said. That's us, Ethan knelt. Who's flying? You, Lily said confidently, but Mommy's helping. Ava's breath caught. Ethan smiled. Looks like a good crew. Later, that night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about how close he'd come to losing things he couldn't replace, not through catastrophe, but through quiet misunderstandings. A judgment, a wall, a refusal to see the full story. The next flight with Michael was uneventful, perfect, even smooth skies. Clear communication, a kind of unspoken harmony. As they leveled off, Michael glanced out the window. Funny, he said. The best flights are the ones no one remembers. Ethan smiled, because everyone gets home. During descent, the sunset poured orange and pink across the cockpit, bathing everything in warmth. Ethan felt it then, not relief, not pride, but gratitude for second chances, for people willing to change, for the courage to stay open even when closing off. Would have been easier if you still believe that hope can grow quietly without noise or applause. Drop a word below. Even a single hope can remind someone they're not alone. When the wheels touched down, it was gentle, almost tender. At home that night, Lily fell asleep between Ethan and Ava during a movie, her breathing slow and even. Ava brushed Lily's hair back softly, careful not to wake her. She's amazing, Ava whispered. Ethan nodded. She always has been, Ava swallowed. Thank you for not giving up on me, or on us. Ethan looked at the darkened TV screen, reflections overlapping. I didn't forgive because it was easy, he said. I forgave because holding on was costing Lily more than letting go. Ava nodded, tears shining. Outside, a plane passed overhead, distant and steady. Ethan closed, his eyes listening not to engines but to breathing, to the quiet proof that healing didn't need to be loud to be real. And as the night settled in, one truth became clear: the most important landings aren't the ones applauded by strangers. They're the ones that bring you home. Morning came softly, filtered through pale curtains and the quiet rhythm of a house at peace. Ethan woke before the alarm, as he often did, but this time without the familiar weight in his chest. Lily was still asleep between him and Ava, her small hand curled into his sleeve like an anchor. He lay there for a moment, listening, not for storms, not for warnings, just breathing. Later that day, they stood together at the small regional airport. No uniforms, no urgency. Lily held both their hands, swinging them happily as a small prop plane taxied by. She waved like she always did, convinced every pilot could see her. "Daddy," she said, "are you flying today?" "Not today," Ethan smiled. "Today I'm staying grounded." She considered that. "That's okay," she decided. "Pilots need rest too." Ava laughed softly. Ethan glanced at her, the past no longer sharp, just present, acknowledged, no longer in control. Across the tarmac, Michael stood near a crew briefing board, mid-conversation. He spotted Ethan and raised a hand. There was ease in his posture now, no armor. Just a man who had learned. "Looks like you've got a better view than any cockpit," Michael called. Ethan nodded. "Best one I know." As they walked away, Lily skipping ahead, Ethan felt something settle deep inside him. A quiet understanding that strength wasn't about authority or ownership or even skill. It was about staying. Staying when you're misunderstood. Staying when it would be easier to walk away. Staying kind when the world expects you to harden. That evening, Ethan stood alone on the porch while Lily brushed her teeth inside. The sky above was streaked with fading gold, a plane carving a white line through it steady, unafraid. He thought back to that first morning in the cockpit, the judgment, the tension, how close everything had come to breaking before it ever had a chance to become something better, not because of an emergency, but because of assumptions. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for a channel, not for a story, but for the soul who carried this weight and still chose patience over pride. One small click can be your way of saying, "I felt this." Lily stepped onto the porch and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Daddy," she said, "I like when you smile." Ethan swallowed. "Me too." Inside, Ava watched them through the window, not intruding, just present. Respectful, earned. Ethan looked up once more at the sky. Planes would always face turbulence. People would always carry invisible battles. And kindness, real kindness, would always be quieter than judgment, but it lasts longer. The world doesn't change when powerful people show power. It changes when ordinary people choose empathy. A captain chose to listen. A father chose to stay soft. A child grew up watching love repair what pain once broke, and somewhere, maybe where you are right now, someone needed this reminder. You never know the full weight someone is carrying, but you can choose not to add to it. The porch light clicked on. The night settled in, and for once the journey felt complete, not because everything was perfect, but because it was honest.